course, you couldn't. Now think about the idea of separate but not equal, as I present you with the following. Up to now, I hope we've established in your mind the idea of inherent differences between genders, and we're not talking here about what's often referred to as the plumbing of the genders only, or merely their capacity to reproduce offspring through that plumbing, as it's crassly put. We're referring to the totality of gender. That is the whole biology of the genders that affects differences in their biological patterns, and even how common things between the genders operate, and how this interplays with society. This extends into emotional and mental realms and affects how people interact. Even if a man or a woman have attraction to their same gender, or simply because some men may be perceived as effeminate, or some women may have tendencies that may seem masculine, none of this negates, and in fact it accentuates the inherent differences between the genders. Now, if marriage is viewed as simply between two consenting adults, then the introduction of children into the equation is inevitable. While there are many states that enable single and same-gender adoptions, a maintained broadening of the legal definition of marriage would demand that equal standing be given to consideration on adoption between committed same-gender couples and married heterosexual couples. Here's a part of the problem, and this is a little bit of a tangent, but it's still relevant to the whole topic. Here's where the problem of the tax-exempt claim comes up with regard to my personal faith. Many on the no on Prop 8 side have claimed that this is a dishonest scare tactic, the tactic being that that a tax-exempt status will be revoked from a church. And they'll claim that since there's no threat of that status to churches who will not marry outside the faith, then we shouldn't worry about this with regard to those churches that won't allow same-gender marriages. But the problem with this is my church operates the largest private adoption agency in the world. It's not for profit, but it's seen as part of our practicing our religion. Would they come in and try to either force us to give equal adoption rights to gay couples or revoke our tax-exempt status? If anybody says that that's unthinkable, then I would posit that they really don't understand the possibility of the legal world, because clearly with what happened in Massachusetts, courts can make decisions that before seemed without precedence. I had to address that issue simply because it's a commonly unconsidered aspect to those who claim that Prop 8 supporters and their claim regarding tax-exempt status is a lie. But it's really just, it's not our opponents, it's not the Prop 2 crowd. They just aren't considering everything, the whole situation. But back to the adoption issue. Because what adoption by gay couples does, of course, as well as lesbian couples deciding to become impregnated through whatever means, is that it fulfills the need to have all marriages as equal for the adults, but it inherently creates inequality in the process. Here, the no on 8 people would have you believe that separate but equal is possible on the side of the children. They can't stand the idea of adults having to relegate their choice in choosing to gain the status of it as being a married couple, simply because they want to ignore gender, but they are all for enforcing the separate but equal doctrine when it comes to raising children. You see, they say that children raised with just 2 mommies and no daddies, or just 2 daddies and no mommies, should be treated as equal situations for the kids. They're separate situations, but they should be treated as equal, because they want us to believe that the separate but equal applies in this instance, because gender doesn't matter when you're raising kids. Their claims, but they're inherently separate, they're inherently separate, are they equal? I posit that no. They will even claim that there's nothing in raising a child that a man can do that a woman can't, or vice versa. Now, if we're talking about individual events in life, he'd be completely correct, but that would be looking at it rather narrowly indeed, because there are also many mature for their age adolescents that are younger than the age of consent that can do any singular thing adult parents can do. This is part of the reason many of us, as far as raising kids, this is part of the reason that many of us are okay with allowing our children to live with for an evening or a day with 14 or a 16-year-old babysitter, somebody we might have had from a reference from other parents, but we feel okay with that because they're capable of doing essentially all the same things that we as adults of the age of consent are able to do. But just as our physiology has much in common, and our day-to-day capacities have much in common, there are many patterns and tendencies and focuses that are not common, even if you're comparing somebody that would be considered an effeminate male to a woman, or a woman with some masculine traits to a male. There are significant differences that go beyond culturally embedded views on gender and are linked to the raw mechanics and hormonal and other physiological and psychological systems, and they're different enough to be relevant even for the raising of children. So we looked at the need to establish justice. All the liberalization of the definition of marriage does is it gives an illusion of increasing equality. That's countered by the diminishing of equality for children. So the follow-up question would be, is marriage more concerned with the welfare of the consenting adults or of the welfare of potential children that they could involve in their relationship? Remember that the children do not have a choice.